On episode 534 of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet Jessie Kanzer and discuss her book, Don't Just Sit There, Do Nothing. You can find the full show notes for this episode at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/532. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness podcast is here for you. Each week, we dive deep into health and fitness topics that affect those of us over 40. I'm Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with specializations in corrective exercise, behavior change, and fitness nutrition, a FAI certified functional aging specialist, and an OTA Level 2 online trainer. I'm joined each week by our co-host, Rachel Everett. She is an NASM certified personal trainer and a RRCA Level 1 run coach. Let us be your coaches as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right? Let's go. Overwhelmed, backsliding, stuck, frustrated. These are just a few words my new clients tell me they were experiencing before we started working together. How about you? Do you find there's not enough day in the day? That even when things are good, you find yourself stuck, sliding backwards and frustrated, like you're running in deep sand and getting nowhere. I get it. Running 4 businesses, some days I don't know which way is up. But about 10 years ago, I managed to crack the code, and it changed my life. Since then, I've gone on to help hundreds of people do a 180 and find a way to lose weight, get fit, and feel younger than they have in years. I wish it was as simple as reading a book or listening to a podcast, but each of us has a unique path with our own challenges and opportunities. You have to find your answer because it's different than mine. Even so, there's a simple way to solve it, to crack the code to your health and fitness. It's right here now. If you'll come on this journey with me, I'm reopening my online training with a 6-week program designed to walk you step by step to a healthier, fitter you. You can learn more at befitfortask.com. With a 100% money-back guarantee, I'll work with you to lose 8 to 10 pounds in that 6 weeks as we start you down the path to being fit for task. Go to befitfortask.com. So what's it going to be? Do you go on with this episode of the podcast and the rest of your day? In 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, where are you going to be? Change, at least the good kind, doesn't happen on its own. You have to make change in your life. Are you going to make change? To be fit for task, to lose weight, to get more fit, to be who you are meant to be. Go to befitfortask.com and take action now. Hello, Raz.
Hey, Alan. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Spring's finally here in Michigan, at least today. we had some weather over the weekend. We are expecting more weather this weekend in terms of snow, but today is nice.
Well, we talked about hormone changes last week, so it's sort of like right now you're
yes,
you're going through the change. You're going through the change.
Absolutely. Michigan is going through the change right now.
Yeah. But it's a spring change, so it's sort of like puberty and not like menopause. But that said, it's still kind of traumatic and crazy.
Yes.
Well, me, I think the interesting thing is I've gotten my nutrition kind of ratcheted down, and everybody on the island knows, okay, Alan's not doing these things, he's not eating these things. And so it's kind of funny because we will go out to dinner every once in a while and people are like, okay, well, Alan's not going to eat that. Alan's not going to eat this, which is actually kind of, it is kind of funny to be sitting there and people watching me eat or watching what I order, more interested in what I'm ordering than what I'm eating. But here's one of the interesting things that hasn't happened before. And this is, as you start thinking about getting older and how things are different, because they can be very different as you age. I am sleeping.
Good.
I'm sleeping a lot.
That's
I mean,
good.
like, because, I say I don't set an alarm, right? And I mean that I don't really set an alarm. I think I set it one day about a couple weeks ago. There were a couple girls that had to catch like a 7 o'clock a boat out, and they're like, "Can we get breakfast early?" And I'm like, "Sure, I'll get up." They just wanted yogurt and all that. So I thought, "Okay, I'll get up. I'll fix them to go." They
Mhm.
actually had time to eat it there, but it was just one of those. That's the only time I set an alarm. Now, so what's
Mm.
happening is I'll still go to bed, typically kind of normalish times. I'm up till about 9 o'clock, maybe 9:30 now, but
Mhm.
I'm sleeping 10, 11, 12 hours a night,
Wow.
almost
Wow.
every night. And it's just kind of this weird, like this morning I woke up at 8. I went to bed at 9.
Oh
And,
my goodness.
and I'm like, and I'm asleep. It's not like I go to bed at 9 and I'm up for a little while hanging out, looking at my phone. I put my phone on the white noise sound machine and I lay down and I go to sleep.
Mhm.
I'll wake up a few times at night to go to the bathroom. And literally this morning got up at 8:30. I mean, well,
Wow.
between 8 and 8:30. Like just rolled up, looked at the clock. It's like, wow, it's after 8 o'clock.
My
What's this all about?
goodness.
Okay. Well, on my side, and I don't know that this is going to adversely affect this recording, but my power just went off. So,
Oh
welcome to
no.
the third world. Now, again, I do have a generator, I mean, a little battery. So, I think I'm still online
Mhm.
and everything. So, we're going to finish our hello and then we're going to get into our final segment. So, if you don't know how this all works, which I'll just share this behind the scenes stuff, this is how a third world country works. The power goes out from
Mhm.
time to time for no apparent reason whatsoever, and then it comes back on. But that aside, Rachel and I get together about once a week and we record our hello segment and then we take a break. And then we record the segment that you hear after the episode. And so, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to finish this recording and then start the new recording for us to do that final segment. So, that's some behind
Cool.
the scenes stuff that whether you wanted it or not, you got live on this episode.
Sure. How fun.
Yeah, we'll talk to you soon, Rachel.
Okie doke.
Our guest today was born in the Soviet Union. At the age of 8, she immigrated with her family to Brooklyn. She is a writer and former reporter and actress. Her work has appeared in the Washington Post, New York Times Daily News, Wall Street Journal, The Independent, the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Huffington Post, Ravishly, and Romper. With no further ado, here's Jessie Kanzer. Jessie, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, your book is a very interesting title. Don't just sit there, do nothing. Healing, chilling, and living with the Tao Te Ching. This, this probably, and I know when I was reaching out to your publicist, came off as why would a fitness guy want to do an interview on a book? Don't just sit there, do nothing. But this is an important book, and I'm glad you wrote this because I think this is going to be a great tool for a lot of people to get past one of the things that I think is one of the biggest health issues that we're personally facing now today, especially today in the modern world. And so I really do think this is a really important book for people to wrap their minds around that we don't have to be doing all the time.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I mean, it's interesting. I spoke to the CEO of the Spartan Up program. He does those races,
Yeah, John
and
Cena.
yeah, exactly, Joe DeCina. I spoke to
Yeah.
him kind of when I was launching the book, and he had an interview, and whereas he was coming at me kind of with the opposite philosophy, right? Like you get it done kind of philosophy. What I showed, I think, was that there's a place where the get it done philosophy and the do nothing philosophy meet. Because, of course, you can't live in any extreme for a prolonged period of time without suffering negative consequences. And because so much of our world touts doing and achievement and accomplishment, I believe that the jokey, of course, the jokey title of "Don't Just Sit There, Do Nothing," that is actually where our attention needs to go now, so that we can create balance in our lives.
Yeah, because one, I'll openly admit I was 10 minutes late getting on this call, and you've got the patience that you learned as you put together the information to put this book and just raising your family and living your life. And so the first thing I want to get into is this concept that is really hard for me because I pride myself, or I always have prided myself with being an overachiever. I want to get more done. It's a kind of a compliment, I only sleep 4 hours. Oh, I only sleep 3 hours. And, all the things that are going on. And there's a quote you had in the book. It's a little bit longer than I would normally read, but I want to read this quote because I think it's really important for someone that's trying to figure out what we're here for, to understand. And the quote goes like this: "Do not be afraid to lay down your load for a minute. You can pick it up anytime you wish. Separate yourself from the endless goals and grievances. It will recharge you like nothing else. Spend a breath, then two, then an hour flowing without worry, and doing what needs to be done without overthinking it, and bask in existence itself. This is the ultimate freedom."
Thank you for sharing that.
And it's true. Anytime that I'm frantic, anytime that I'm panicked, I'm a wreck. I'm not nearly the quality that I need to be the overachiever. And so it's one of those, if you rush in, that's great. It looks like you're doing something, but the looking like you're doing something often isn't doing yourself justice.
That's exactly right. That this practice of doing nothing, I use quotations because, of course, I mean, we're never doing nothing, honestly. Like if you're alive, your body breathes itself, your cells are recharging themselves, stuff is going on at all times. There's always, I mean, the one thing about this existence is it's always in motion. There is actually no complete stillness. And what this recharging that I'm talking about, this taking the time to just, and it could be really brief on a busy day. It could be as brief as a few deep breaths, but taking the time to recenter yourself then reconnects you with a flow of life, because there is a flow. There is, when you enter that flow and when you are doing stuff from the flow, the doing becomes easier. So it's not like pushing the boulder up the hill. It's just going with the stream, sort of. And what I've noticed is a lot of the problems with our very overly busy society and all of this barrage of information we constantly get, and our brains become overextended, our minds become overextended, and we are exhausted before we even get started in a way. So when we take the time to reconnect and we take the time to block out all that external noise and just kind of connect with the power, with the inner guidance we have within us, each person has within them, even when we are doing, it's more easeful, so that all of the stress kind of goes away, and we do, or some of the stress, I should say, goes away, and we do the next right thing, and then the next right thing. And step by step, you live your life, you do the things you need to do, but you're not overly stressed and frantic and crazy about it all.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because what I'll get a client comes up and says, okay, I need to lose X pounds. We'll just throw that out there. And, they'll have a reason. Sometimes they'll have a deadline. There's something coming up, they want to be ready for this or that. They've been carrying this for too long, so they need to do something now. And the first question is, what do I do? Mm. And, because we get fascinated with a result.
Yes.
What is my life going to be like if I'm in this pant size or dress size? What is my life going to be like if, I'm no longer carrying this extra weight? If the scale says something tomorrow that's fantastic, what is my life going to be like? And I think in that look to the journey, the look to the results, we lose sight of the journey. And you talked about this actually a good bit in the book, because much of the struggles, much of the things that you went through, you look back and you've said it was the journey I remember. The results were great, but
right.
Yeah.
And the result, of course, it's great that I have this happy life now, and I'm a fulfilled person, and that's all wonderful. But it's interesting because, my book, Don't Just Sit There, Do Nothing, came out recently. And I have a lot of people telling me, because I share a lot of myself in there, and I have a lot of people saying that's so brave, or that's so, you accomplish so much, or, et cetera. And there's this like push to celebrate this accomplishment, which I think is wonderful, but I'll be 100% honest. I like myself now, not any more than I liked myself 3 years ago when I started the book. So because by the time I began this work of putting down my own lessons and all of the stuff I learned by following Eastern philosophies like the Tao Te Ching, and by reconnecting with my core, by the time I got to writing it, I already knew that it's not the end result that matters. And I think it's so funny, and it's wonderful and sweet, but it's so funny that people celebrate the achievement. But if they actually looked, in the lessons that I'm teaching in the book, that every failure is part of the achievement, every mistake, every fall, our entire journeys are as important as any accomplishment, any goal, any achievement that you reach. And I fully celebrate that journey now of struggle that I had. I'm really grateful for it, because that's what made me who I am. So I would really urge people who, are focused on certain goals to remember to focus on the now, on the journey, and see what they can. That's where our greatest lessons come from. And sometimes our greatest lessons come from the bottom as well, before we even get going.
Yeah. I was having a conversation with a client yesterday, and he was telling me he loves running, but he hates going to the gym and lifting weights. And so we spent some time talking about kind of the underlying reason that he might feel that way. And then another way that I feel like, as he goes into the gym, that he should be looking at that time. And a lot of the things we got into were the things that he enjoyed about running, he was experiencing in the gym. He just wasn't aware. He wasn't kind of in the moment to recognize, oh, I can move my body and I can push more weight than I did last time, versus being able to maybe run a little bit further or a little bit faster than he did last time. The same feelings are there. They're just coming in a different way. And if you're not open to them, you don't really experience them, and you don't really recognize what you're going through. And a lot of it's, talked about flow in the book some. Can you get a little bit into flow? Because I think part of really getting into the journey is when you recognize that flow is the journey.
Yeah. And actually, I think that flow is very interesting to athletes, because anybody who follows any kind of sport sees a difference. We know there's a difference between, say, a Michael Jordan or an Alex Honnold, the climber. Like, there's a difference in the people who are able to exceed their physical limitations to do certain magical things that we get to watch. But the reality is, everybody, in order to accomplish something they've never accomplished before, needs to enter the flow state. And then the real gift is the flow state itself. So what happens in the flow state, and it was identified, earlier in the 1900s, therapists identified the actual characteristics of the flow state. And it doesn't have to be a physical activity. Some people, like I actually enter the flow state when I write, as an example, and some people do it when they paint. But what happens in the state is, whatever it is that you're doing consumes you so greatly that you lose, for the time that you're doing it, you lose your ego. You lose the constant judge that's looking at yourself and judging and thinking, overthinking, and you kind of become one with the motion, with the flow of the activity that you're in. And it's a really beautiful experience, obviously very recharging. And this is why I say, the Tao Te Ching, this ancient philosophy, is very full of paradoxes, because in a way, it's the flow state that helps us reach stillness. But here we're talking about stillness of the mind. And when we become one with the doing, that is ultimate stillness. And it's a very ironic, because of course we become one with the action, but it's becoming one and becoming very, very present. And what happens is that monkey mind kind of goes away for that short period of time.
Yeah. And the way I look at it is, okay, you go into a gym and they have the music blaring sometimes. There's people in there, they're talking, they're doing weights, they're all about. So you're not in a confined by yourself space. But when I'm really in the flow of lifting, so during a lift, I don't hear anything. I don't see anything. I'm literally at that moment trying to envision myself inside my body, inside the muscle. And any other feedback that I'm getting, be it my eyes or whatever, is really just geared on, is my head, my body, my frame, everything where it's supposed to be at this point in the lift. And so for me, the flow state is actually so present that I'm unaware of pretty much anything else. So you talk about the monkey mind. When you get into flow state, you're only aware of what you're actually doing at that point in time, physically or mentally, but you're in that moment, and it's such a powerful moment. But this book and your book, they're taking us through a process of trying to find ways to relax, slow down,
yeah,
and find that space more often.
Right. So I am a big fan of whatever activity can get you in the flow state as well. And I one of the chapters, as you know, talks about finding that activity for yourself, because I do think it's of the utmost importance to be able to find enjoyable ways to be in the present. So it's not always another, I don't want spirituality or mindfulness to become yet another to-do thing on a person's list. And the magic of when you're able to enter that flow state, the magic speaks for itself once you're able to reach it. And I say in the book that everyone's reached it at some point or another. You just have to sometimes look back on your life and see what that is for you. It's that awareness. And in fact, so Don't Just Sit There, Do Nothing is divided into 3 parts. The first is identity, which is understanding who we really are beyond just the personality and the body. And number 2 is the awareness that you and I have been speaking of, is understanding sort of the energy flow around us, of ourselves, what we bring to situations, to the world, what others bring into our space. And then number 3 is the creation. So it's interesting to me, creation meaning like creating the life you want, achieving the goals you want. And it's interesting because I think most people go straight to the creation. They're so right. They come and they say, how long till I can be this many pounds or, look like this. And so we always, as human beings, we're so obsessed with instant gratification that we rush to the creation part. But really it's these other journeys, these other investigations of ourselves that are needed in order to have a full, joyous journey to whatever we want. So it's not just, there is no snap your fingers and then you're a certain weight or a certain goal is achieved. It's not like that. And there's a reason for that.
Yeah. I kind of equate it with if the first thing you do when you're going to walk in and try to build a house is start and grab a hammer and some nails, you've missed some steps.
Exactly. It's exactly it. And so what I do in Don't Just Sit There, Do Nothing, but what I also do for myself, because look, I'm a human of this world. I'm very, very human. I also want everything I want yesterday, So what I do is remind myself constantly of the beauty of the now, the very imperfect now, not some perfect future scenario, because of course there really never is that, right? There's always the movement forward. There's never really a static moment where you've arrived and that's it and forevermore. That's not how we work. So I always remind myself and bring myself back. And whether it's with breathing, whether it's with the flow state, whether it's just a mental exercise, the ability to bring myself into the present, to practice some mindfulness, I remind myself that this is where it's at. The journey is where it's at. I don't want to get to the end of my life and have missed the whole thing.
Yeah. And the one thing that I find really interesting, and I want people to really wrap their mind around this, is the fact that you're reading these books the fact that you're listening to podcasts and you have something huge going on for you right now. You've made some internal changes of self-love and self-appreciation and now self-awareness to make some drastic changes. Now, that will they be drastic in the means of I want it now? No, but you've already made a huge change just by listening to this podcast, just by reading this book.
Such a good point. Once you open your mind to possibility, to, because I think of myself as a lifelong spiritual searcher. I'm never going to stop my quest for more, more information about personal development, more information about growth. And anybody who is on that journey, and of course, if they're listening to your podcast, if they're reading, don't just sit there, do nothing, they're on that journey. I say you're there already, because yes, sometimes changes happen slowly. They're not always overnight. But when you open yourself up to new possibilities, new ways of thinking, to quote Wayne Dyer, he's a great spiritual teacher who passed some years ago that I was a big fan of. He said, change your thoughts, change your life. It's not a change that happens in, one instant, but you're on that journey of change and improvement and love and all the good stuff that we want.
Yeah. Now, some people will say they don't want to live forever, and a lot of people do want to live forever. But in a lot of the books that you read, a lot of the studies, they go through and say, okay, well, why are certain people's living to 100 years old or older? So you've heard about the blue zones and all those types of things. And one of the cores that's in there that I think is missing in the modern world for a lot of us is the concept of finding purpose. Individuals who live longer live better lives because they have a purpose. And you talked about how you were on a particular career path, and then you had your car crash moment.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, for sure. A literal car crash moment. So just a little backstory. I am an immigrant. I came from the former Soviet Union. The country is now Latvia, but when I was born there, it was just a giant blob of Soviet Union. And I left there when I was 7. We were refugees, and my family went through a bunch of different countries before we sought asylum in America. And a lot of my early life is defined by the sort of loss of self, loss of identity, and just molding myself to what was around me so that I could be accepted, so that I could belong, so that I could find friends and fun, etc. And then also at the same time, pleasing my family. So pleasing those around me, being the good immigrant child. So eventually that catches up with you. When you're living not for yourself, when you haven't connected with your own desires, with your own purpose, as you've mentioned, it catches up with you because you're not living an authentic life. And so I was in college, straight A student, kind of walking the path of goodness according to what my immigrant society wanted for me in business school. Internally, I was really suffering. I had an eating disorder. I was depressed. I suffered from anxiety, panic attacks. And as soon as I graduated college, and I had so many interviews with all the big banks lined up, but as soon as I graduated college, I got into a major car crash. And that was my really rock bottom moment, because I was, of course, struggling emotionally with all of these kind of secret struggles. I think my mom was aware of them by then, but nobody else was. And then my body was broken physically. And in that moment, why it was such a beautiful downfall for me is because I realized I can't live this way. I have to figure out who I am, what I want, and how I want my life to look. And that was a very life-changing moment, because in my literal downfall, I reached for information. I reached for the Tao Te Ching and other spiritual teachings and my own health. And that became more important to me than the discomfort of letting people down. So my own truth became the most important guiding light of my life.
Yeah. And I've had a couple of those car crash moments. One of mine was when the Challenger exploded in '86, and I was a sophomore in college majoring in physics. that made me rethink some things. And then with my layoff in 2017, now I'm a personal trainer living on a Caribbean island. If you had asked me before 2017, that was not in the plan. That was not there. And I guess what I would just put forward is we probably have these car crash moments every day, every week, every month. They just aren't as rock bottom as you will. They're not actual car crashes, if you will.
Right.
How do we go about recognizing when our spirit, for lack of a better word, our oneness, who we are, is needs something, but the judges outside of us, the people, have different expectations of it. How do we recognize that disconnect and kind of still ourselves for doing something different?
Well, I love this quote that the universe speaks to us in whispers, and then it speaks to us in shouts. So when you go through enough shout moments, those car crash moments, it becomes more important to you to start listening for the whispers, because, I don't want to learn from strings of bottoms. I want to be able to learn and communicate with my life and with myself, throughout, like you said, on a daily basis, so that we don't have to wait for those car crash moments. And by the way, I also refer, and Joe just said there, do nothing, to the pandemic as society's car crash. And unfortunately, our societies often do wait for those car crash moments before changes take place. But that's a whole other topic, of course. And I wholly believe that change on the big scale happens one individual at a time. When enough of us sort of awaken, the world will change as well. And the way to do that is to develop a constant communication to understand, first of all, the understanding, just the awareness that life is speaking to you. That's really important. I don't believe in luck. I don't believe in coincidences. I believe that life communicates with us, and it gives us feedback all the time. And there's a part of us, there's a center within us that knows and understands that, but often we cannot hear it. And we cannot hear it because of the noise of the outside world and the messaging that we've allowed to enter within us. And, I read recently that today, in one day, the average person takes in more information than just a couple of 100 years ago people did in their entire lifetime. So that's just, but we're the same humans, right? We're the same brains. So that's just to show how much we have coming at us. And there's nothing wrong with you for being overstimulated, for being confused, for being tired, because there is a lot coming at us. So then it becomes on us to create moments of stillness, moments of flow, moments where we shut everything else out so that the only thing we hear is our own breath and our own spirit and our own inner power. And when we do that enough, we are able to recognize that communication, that constant communication with source energy, with the universe, with life, call it what you will. I don't really care what your religious beliefs are, because it's not about that. It's about establishing a really good level of communication with, you could call it life itself if you don't believe in a higher power, but there is that line of communication and we need to be able to hear it. And that's just a daily practice.
Yeah, because you're not going to get your purpose from anybody else. Unfortunately, you're not going to get it from a podcast like this one. You're not going to get it from a book. Your purpose is your purpose, and you have to be listening to yourself. And to do that, you have to be quiet.
Right. And I love that you said that when you lift weights, all the noise disappears. So that's a good reminder to us that it doesn't need to be a literal quiet. It needs to be an internal quiet, and whatever gets you there. And guess what? If you don't know what gets you there, that's just like most people, and that's fine. And some days I don't know what's going to get me there. And it's just a beautiful experiment. When you look at life as this beautiful experiment, you kind of take all the pressure off, because also, enlightenment, I like to think of it as lightening up a little bit. We also take ourselves uber seriously. The purpose, finding your purpose doesn't have to be this heavy thing that you carry. It could be finding your purpose today, for the day, for the week. And then when you start being more and more aligned with your inner calling, with your inner knowing, before you know it, you're living your purpose. And it's not always that put in a box or put into words like my purpose is being or when you're living your purpose because you feel fulfilled.
Absolutely. Now, every health and fitness coach out there has probably heard this quote from Lao Tzu: "A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." Now, what most of us haven't heard is the next line in that verse, which is, "People often fail in their tasks just as they're about to accomplish them."
Yep.
So this is really, really important because I've heard the parable. You may have heard the parable of the guy, the gold miner who was digging for gold.
Yes.
And then he decided he wasn't going to find the gold. So he sold the gold mine, and a guy dug like a foot deeper and found the biggest, find in history.
Yeah.
1 foot, it was just 1 foot. Can we talk a little bit, because yes, starting is extremely hard.
Yeah.
But so is finishing. So is keeping
totally.
with it. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yes. And so the chapter in my book that I talk about that is called Journeying, actually. And you are so right. So first of all, I think most people know that quote, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step," but I'm not sure if a lot of people know that it comes from the Tao Te Ching, which, when I tell people, they're often floored because that's from 6th century BC. And it's funny to me that human nature hasn't changed all that much, right? We've always had a fear of starting. And yes, the other part of the equation is, of course, seeing something through to the end, not giving up too early. And people often fail in their tasks just as they're about to accomplish them. And then it says, "So give as much care at the end as in the beginning, then there will be no failure." And I love that because what is failure really? Failure is only failure if you quit. Otherwise, it's a teaching moment from life, from the universe, from yourself. And sometimes, and I would actually venture to say a lot, maybe most of the time, things don't turn out exactly as we had envisioned. But that doesn't mean, they can turn out much better than what we planned for, but we have to allow for the flow to be different. I think that human beings tend to want to control things so much that they miss the bigger picture sometimes. And I say in the book, if you look at your life, have you perhaps quit too soon, whether it's on a venture, whether it's on your health goals, whether it's in a relationship, just when maybe it would have gotten good, but you decided to quit. But the other side of it, I would say, is sometimes quitting is the right thing to do. When your goals, like in my case, before my car crash moment, when your goals are not aligned with yourself, change, of course, is absolutely the correct choice there. So again, this goes back to that connectedness with your inner self, because your inner self knows. Your inner self knows if you check in with it, just hang on longer, just keep going. And sometimes you do throw in the towel before too soon.
Yeah. And I think we all go into these, like, okay, so I'm going to go on this diet, or I'm going to start this exercise program, or I'm going to do this thing, take a new course to learn something new, to do something different. And the problem comes in is not that we can't do it. It's that we don't believe we can do it. And one of the things you had in the book, there's another quote from your book. I think I said I could probably sit here and just read the book. And is, "We cannot wait for proof in order to believe in our visions." And I think too many people are waiting for proof that they can lose the weight, that they can get healthy, that they can solve their health problems, that they can learn something new. I mean, we're over 40, so we're not supposed to. We're the old dogs. We're not supposed to be learning new things, but you can. people are doing it every day, but you don't have to wait for that proof. How does someone listen to themselves, listen to their inner voice in a way that says, okay, I need to get confidence from this? Because in reality, if you're waiting for someone else to give you the go ahead, to give you that confidence, you're not going to be happy with the results. That's what I've seen. How does someone reach inside and find that self-belief?
Sometimes you have to fake it till you make it. And I say this jokingly, but in my section on creation, we talk a lot about, there are steps, right, to getting what you want. And again, I will say what you want with a little bit of space around it, because often in my experience, things end up looking a little different, and that's okay. Or there's like another step that I hadn't foreseen, and that's okay. I also find that when you commit so fully to a path, you're often given some obstacles to overcome or some tests. The hero's journey always has tests on it.
Yeah.
But to me, I kind of divided the steps of creation into three smaller steps. So, one is intention, 2 is embodiment, and 3 is releasing the goals, releasing the end results. And so intention is what we're talking about of, making your goal, making your vision a more clear one. Because a lot of people walk around without a real vision for their lives. And for me, like for someone like me, because I have become quite a flexible person, my vision changes sometimes from day to day, or I allow my vision to alter, but I always have a vision and intention. And the second part is what we're talking about here. The second part of embodying it. Now, what embodying it means is acting as the person who already got what they wanted. And that's the really hard part. Yes, you need to believe before there's proof. That's where we all get tripped up. Because it's like, yeah, when I see that I can do it, I will give my all to it. But it actually works the opposite. And the how, there's no magic bullet for the how, but I do, in this case, I will go against my own title. And I'll say that sometimes in the doing, the belief comes. I've seen that for myself. So I also watch my kids closely. I have a 5 and a 7-year-old. And kids are a lot better at a lot of these spiritual lessons than we are, because they haven't been taught out of them yet.
We haven't beat it out of them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The world hasn't. And like, if you ever watch how they play pretend, they are so invested. I mean, they're not thinking, yes, my 5-year-old loves to pretend she's a teenager. She's 13. She's going to high school, whatever. And obviously, in some level, she knows that is not true. But she has no problem pretending for like 3 hours straight that I'm a teenager, mom. And, she talks differently. And I love it, because what stops us from doing it? Like, sure, I know on some level, for example, I have not yet lost the weight. I have not yet reached my level of fitness. But why can't I pretend for the hour that I'm in the gym, for the hour that I set aside to run? Why can't I pretend that I'm already that person? Why can't I play with it and play that game of pretend and just start doing it? Because our brains don't really know the difference between pretend and reality. If we tell our brain enough times that I am this, you'll start to believe it. So you got to play with it. It's really adapting, in my opinion, a playful attitude and allowing yourself to pretend that you already are what you want to be, allowing yourself to believe in it, even if it seems ludicrous.
I saw this it actually came over as it was a business podcast, and the guy said it, and I've kind of adapted it, but it's the same thing. And his thing was be, do, have. And he says so many people start with the do, and he says that's not how you do it. You start with the be, and the be being is, okay, if I'm someone who is this person, is healthy and fit, then that's who I am. And then what does the person like that do? Well, okay, they set aside time on their calendar and they show up at the gym. They shop and they buy whole foods. They cook for their family, so they know what they're eating. Yes, they still go out and have a drink with their friends every once in a while. Yes, every once in a while, okay, they're going to take a holiday and they're not going to do their workouts. But a person who is reasonably in the position you want to be. If you're doing the things that they do, eventually you will have what they have. And so that's the whole principle of the be, do, have is very similar to what you're saying is, okay, if you fake it till you make it, but you still have to do the work. So there's no just, you got to do both. There's a middle section, like you said, the doing. But you got to slow down and see it first.
Right. And, when you embody the person that you want to be, you'll naturally do the things they do. Like you said, the person who is already fit, well, yeah, they leave time for exercise. That's what they do. And the releasing part, I think, is also very important because, again, this is where instant gratification needs come in. Releasing your timeline and your goal is important from time to time. It doesn't mean that we don't have a framework in which we operate, but releasing the reins that hold everything so tightly so that you realize that if you aren't, for example, whatever weight you set for yourself on the day you set for yourself, but you're getting there, that's good enough. You don't need to have, 100% control over everything, as long as you're doing that step-by-step journey we spoke of.
Yeah. Jessie, I define wellness as being the healthiest, fittest, and happiest you can be. What are 3 strategies or tactics to get and stay well?
This is, you're asking me to define? Yes, to define. Good question. So I define wellness and success and all of those big words, that I think we all strive for, as the feeling of purpose, fulfillment, and joy in your body, in your life, in your situation. And that doesn't mean 100% happiness 100% of the time, but that means that you are where you're meant to be. It's that feeling. And I think we spoke of this feeling a little earlier when, we have those car crash moments or those smaller car crash moments that realize we're off course. It's that ability, because we still have them. We're still, even if you are living the life you want to live, you still have moments like that. And it's also wellness to me is that conversation, that communication with life where you're able to course correct as you go along. It's that faith in yourself. And can you tell me again the second part, the 3?
Okay. What are 3 strategies or tactics to get and stay well?
I'm actually going to use the Tao Te Ching for this one.
Perfect.
The 3 main teachings of the Tao Te Ching, which are really helpful to me for my wellness and my health. And of course, I look at health as both a mental and a physical well-being, and I know you do as well. So the 3 kind of cornerstones of the Tao Te Ching are simplicity, patience, compassion. So to me, simplicity is simplifying all of those messages that we talked about that are bombarding us nonstop, simplifying daily, even if it's for moments a day, to that conversation within yourself, that one voice, that one inner guidance, constantly simplifying our craziness, our crazy mind, our crazy schedules, simplifying it as much as we can to our own inner guidance and our own physical well-being, because I do strongly believe that we are in this body for this lifetime and we must take care of our vehicle. And I'm a very spiritual person, but I will tell you that I'm also a fit person, not because I'm so great. And clearly I wasn't always, because, I suffered from an eating disorder for many years, but I take my health very seriously because this is my vehicle to have my spiritual growth in this lifetime. So when I simplify everything, I understand that all I need to do is take care of my mind, take care of my spirit, take care of my body, and I'm good. And then the number 2 is patience. And that's what we've already discussed, is the patience to get to where you want to go and not to rush things, and to understand that the journey is as important, if not more important, than the destination. And the last is compassion, starting with compassion towards yourself. When you practice compassion towards yourself, when you forgive yourself for falling off the wagon, for example, if you're on a health journey or overcoming addiction, when you have compassion for your very humanness, you're able to forgive yourself instead of beating yourself up. You're able to continue. You're able to forgive and continue. And when you give that to yourself, you give that to others naturally. And so you live in a more natural state of ease.
Thank you for that. Jessie, if someone wanted to learn more about you or learn more about your book, Don't Just Sit There, Do Nothing, where would you like for me to send them?
My website, jessiekanzer.com, JessieKanzer.com, has all of that information on there. But of course, Don't Just Sit There, Do Nothing is available everywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target even. But the information on my website has a lot of free resources as well. I have a free ebook. I have bonus chapters. You can actually read the first 2 chapters of Don't Just Sit There, Do Nothing for free. And I also have all my upcoming events on there. So I'm teaching at Omega Institute, which is in Rhinebeck, New York in May, but I do virtual panels and workshops from time to time. So all of that's on jessiekanzer.com.
Okay. You can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/534, and I'll be sure to have links there. Jessie, thank you so much for being a part of 40 Plus Fitness.
Oh, thank you so much. And I am 40 plus, by the way. I forgot to mention that, but I'm 40 and a half at this point. So I'm with you guys.
Welcome to the club.
Thank you.
Welcome back, Raz.
Hey, Alan. A lot of that discussion with Jessie has a lot of correlation with my running habits, especially the flow state. It was interesting to hear her discuss flow state in a way that I never would have thought about it before.
Yeah. I mean, if you've ever played an athletic sport or ever done something like running consistently, so you got to get past that it sucks part.
Yes.
But when you get to a point of, for lack of a better word, performance, where you actually are very comfortable doing what you're doing, there's an opportunity for flow state. And for most of us, our experience goes back to athletics. It goes back to sports. That's when we feel the flow state the most, because there's a performance improvement. There's an enhancement to what's going on that we feel. And so it's very real. I mean, you literally are doing better at that point. But we're capable of doing this with just about anything that we have some competency for. So it can be making cookies, it can be knitting, it can be at work, it can be at play, it can be at learning. I'm right now studying for my performance enhancement specialty. And, there are points in time when I'm sitting there studying and it's like, okay, this stuff is really coming in. I'm understanding it. I'm doing well on the tests, pre-tests anyway. And it's just a function of the focus, the attention, and then the comfort that flow state kind of gives you. And so the real specialty here is if you can slow down enough, as she said, do nothing. But even in short spurts, if you can do nothing to allow your body and your brain and everything to kind of just relax, flow state becomes a lot easier.
Oh, yeah. It's interesting. She mentioned that we have such busy lives. She's true. It's so true. We're barraged with information all over the place. It's kind of frightening how much information passes through our eyes and into our brains on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis. And it is hard for people to be still and appreciate the silence and the quietness. And then, like we had talked about earlier, in our personal lives, when everything seems to be going crazy, the car's in the shop, the kids are sick, something broke at the house, there's all these problems going on, because our brain, I like to use the analogy of a tornado. My head is just swirling with information, and it's hard to grasp on something to identify a problem and solve it. But if you can get into a flow state where your brain is still and you can appreciate the silence, then you can identify and solve problems probably a lot more efficiently than if you're freaking out about it.
Yeah. Because, and we talked about this a little bit during the episode. So many times you want the tool, you want the strategy or tactic. How do I
Yeah.
do this? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we're immediately into strategies and tactics instead of the pulling back in and the saying, okay, well, one, why is this important? Okay. Why is this important? And is this important right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
So something's going on at your house and it's like, okay, great. There's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something I have to deal with now?
Right.
And
Oh
the
my
only way you do
gosh.
that is to come back to your commitment, come back to your why, your vision, the whole bit of it. Why are we doing this?
Mm-hmm.
Where are we going? Okay. And then the self-awareness. Okay. I know this is going to bother me until I get this thing fixed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there something I can personally do to make it bother me less?
Mm-hmm.
Can I actually shift my brain and say, I got to take care of the kids first?
Right.
And I'm not going to call the repairman and argue with him about needing a window of opportunity for him to be at my house because that's when it works. It's like, okay, fine. You can't make it today between 4 and 5. Done. I'm out. Take care of the kids, get the car out of the shop, call the repairman in the morning, figure something out. But it's really hard to do that when, the drip, 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 the faucet
it's constant. Yeah.
is calling you. And so it's that self-awareness of, okay, yeah, that's going to bother me. But if I look at the bigger picture, the bigger journey, the who I need to be, the where I need to go, am I even going to remember that drip, drip, drip
Right.
a year from now, 5 years from now?
What I've recently told the kids, but both of my kids are college age, by the way, and so their problems are a little different than my problems in life. But I tell them, do these problems require the baggage and the emotion that you're assigning to it? Is it really that important? And like in your analogy of a home, if the faucet is dripping, is that something that needs to be tended to immediately? No, because there's not a burst pipe or something that's bigger or worse. But if you could just take it down a notch, not panic about it, not fret about it, not worry about it, and just assign the next task to it, and it'll get done. And like you said, it'll be forgotten in days from now, weeks from now, it'll be all over.
Yeah. But I'm going to be the first to admit that is hard. That step right there is really hard, which is why having the foundation, the why, the vision. Who are you and who are you going to be? And so a big part of what her book is about is really getting to that self-awareness. It's really getting to who you are and who you deserve to be and who you want to be, and making all those things line up in a way that makes sense for you. And is Jessie where she wants to be in her life? And the answer is no, but she's closer than she would have been if she hadn't taken this approach. And, we all love those quotes. And so you kind of go through a lot of those quotes that they came from this book, not from her book, but the book that her book is sort of based on, which is, she's taking that ancient wisdom, if you will, because it seems pretty weird. Okay. Someone 3,000 years ago was actually going through the same emotional issue that I'm going through, and they didn't even have Twitter.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you're like, okay, well, they had wars, they had famine, they had struggles. They may have been slightly different struggles, but the human nature to approach everything as a disaster was still there. And so for someone to say, okay, is it a disaster? No, it's not a disaster. Actually stopping and doing nothing gives me the opportunity to put it in its place and really come up with a structure that works for me for solving that problem, if it needs to be solved at all.
Sure. Yeah. I love that. And you guys discussed at the end, the be, do, have concept as well, and not skipping any steps to get to the end, to the outcome.
Yeah. Because again, if you don't believe it, it won't happen. It just won't. If you don't believe that you can lose the weight you want to lose, it's not going to happen. You're like, I tried everything. It's just nothing's going to work. Well, you have to believe that the next thing you do is going to work. And you do that from okay, sit back, have a reason, a why, have a vision of what that is, really an emotional one, and then a structure of who I am and what has stopped me in the past, and then a plan. And most people go at this with the the tool. We'll throw a hammer at it. Okay, well, it's a screw. Okay, great. And then the next time you try, it's a nail, and you got a screwdriver in your hand because you didn't stop to define the problem. And we all do it. I'm guilty. Everyone's just as guilty as everyone else of doing these things because this is the hard part. This is why we struggle, and we've always struggled, and that's why books like this, writings like this exist. Most of the time, those lessons were meant to be handed down to our children, to our students, things like that. These were teachers. These were what we would call the intellectuals that were putting together the content of making us a better society. And so they became writings later. They were often oral at the time, and sometimes they were written. And then once they were written, then there was a printing press, and then there was more of these ideas. Now there's the internet. And there's more of these ideas. The ideas are great, but you got to go back to you. You got to go back to that very beginning of this has to be about you and what works for you. And you're unique. As odd as that sounds, with over 8 billion people, there's no other single person exactly like you. What you need at this point in time is very different than what anyone else needs. And the only way you're going to get that information is to be really quiet and still and listen, because your inner voice is going to help you get there.
Yeah. We have a saying in our family that goes way back generations. And apparently my great-grandparents and grandparents used to say to their kids, remember who you are and what you represent. And it just gives you pause for thought. So as my mom was heading out on a date or some such thing, my grandparents would tell her, remember who you are and what you represent. And it's just a simple reminder to focus on yourself and what values and morals and things that you hold important to you. And remember that when crazy things happen or you need to make some decisions in life, remember who you are and what you represent.
Love that. So, Rachel, next time we're going to get an opportunity to talk about your race. Good. As we're talking right now, you haven't quite done it. You're close.
Yep.
But good luck with that.
Thank you.
And we'll talk next week.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we welcome back Dr. Robert Davis and discuss his book, Fitter Faster, the smart way to get in shape in just minutes a day. Until then, have a happy and healthy week.